So talking about Mercury retrograde in Scorpio, it's a time for creativity and reflecting on our ideas, but we have to be careful not to spin out on dark thoughts and paranoia. I'm going to talk about that in this update. So when Mercury goes retrograde, it's a time to reflect on our thinking process, our intellect, our ideas, how we organize things. You know, Mercury is very important. Of course, it's known as the speaker, right? The one who is connected to language and ideas. But that is a sort of noticeable quality of Mercury because we can tell how organized we are and how together we are in our ideas based on what we speak and how we communicate. But again, a deeper principle with Mercury has to do with organizing our world and ways that we want to feel and to comprehend things accurately. So, for example, we want to, like, if we're good with our money, it's because we're tracking it correctly. We're not spending more than we have, or we're not hoarding it in a way where we're also not able to enjoy it. Mercury is a very important planet in living a happy life, because we want to learn from life experiences and then adjust and then accommodate other people's views. We want to speak clearly. We want our voice to be heard. We want to identify our own voice. And in many ways, Mercury is that kind of voice in your head that's interpreting the world around you. As you go through your life, different things happen. Some are enjoyable, some are unpleasant, and what's the story that you're telling yourself? Is it an accurate story? Is it correct? This is a lot of what Mercury is about. The first thing that you communicate is actually to yourself, your worldly self to your higher self. This is why Mercury is said to be the minister and the one closest to the king. It's the one who has the king's ear, because Mercury is very close to the sun. I've often wondered why Mercury doesn't just get sucked right into the sun, because the sun is so big and Mercury is so close to it and so small. It's obviously because of the gravity of the other planets, but it looks like Mercury would just get sucked right into the sun. And most of the time we can't even see Mercury in the sky, because he's either lost in the rays of the sun, or he's behind the sun, or he's in front of the sun. And so, but Mercury is it almost feels to me like a kind of extension of the sun, at least in that, he goes around the sun so fast and he's so close to it. It's literally that part of our awareness that is always interpreting the power and translating the power of the self. At least it's supposed to be. And hopefully it's translating it accurately and correctly, and we're getting the right story, not the story that is corrupted by bias or fear or drama or whatever. So when Mercury's retrograde, again, that tends to back up and we reflect on that story. So it's a really good time to be reflecting on how your story is getting spread around, and how accurate is that story. Is it truthful? Like, are the things you tell yourself, are they really true? Are you sure they're true? The things you say to other people, is there integrity behind your words? Or do you use words to manipulate and to coerce? Maybe it's very subtle, and often it is very subtle. It's a time to really reflect on that, especially with Mercury going through Scorpio, because it's not the best sign for Mercury, at least in being precise. Of course, Mercury rules Gemini and Virgo, which is an air sign and an earth sign. But through all air and earth signs, let me put this screenshot. through all air and earth signs, Mercury is quite precise. When he's in watery signs, becomes quite emotional, maybe sort of dreamy. Of course, it's debilitated in Pisces. In Cancer, it's also a little confused. In Scorpio, Mercury is a little more focused because of the nature of Mars, and it's actually very good for a sort of synthetic, creative thinking. But we have to be careful when Mercury is in Scorpio to not manipulate through language and use language to try to control situations and try to manipulate people. Again, one of the things that can happen is even being subtly deceptive or coercive or saying the thing we need to say in order to get what we want, rather than speaking the truth. They're not always the same thing, right? And you want to look at a certain part of your nature where you have at times not been honest, not been truthful, and it's come back to get you. Maybe you weren't truthful because you say, well, if I tell you the truth, then I'm not going to get what I want. And people will say this and sort of justify it. But again, if someone is doing that, then they're not using Mercury in the way it's supposed to be, because Mercury is literally about speaking the truth. When Mercury is powerful, we'll speak the truth whether we get what we want or not. And again, when someone isn't honest with us and we realize that when they weren't telling us the truth, they were just telling us what they thought they needed to tell us in order to get what they wanted, we lose a lot of trust in them. Look at how you use language. Look at how you communicate. Look at the way you use words. Do you use words as a tool to just get what you want, as the means to an end? Again, maybe it's not conscious. Maybe it's an unconscious pattern. I mean, it's not uncommon. Notice how bad people communicate. Most people are really poor communicators, and they don't really know why. You get into a lot of miscommunications, and they're like, I don't know why. Again, this is all related to Mercury, and then we wind up confused as to, like, how did I get here? Why is this happening? But very rarely are we really honest with ourselves, and we say, you know what? If I was honest with myself, I will say that I didn't really speak the truth there, and maybe the things that this person thinks about me now are justified because I wasn't honest with them, and I wouldn't have liked to be misled that way. As an example, so this is the sort of psychological, maybe inner workings of Mercury and Scorpio. It's a time to be really emotionally courageous about that and really reflect on the way you use language, especially if it's to coerce, especially based on fear and loss. Again, think of something like with a partner where you feel vulnerable, because this is a quality of Scorpio. And you feel like, okay, like you notice that even a little passive aggression. Like let's say you notice that your partner's maybe looking at someone and you're starting to feel a little jealous. And so again, instead of maybe saying something honest, which the hard thing to say is, really kind of hurt my feelings when you were looking at that girl or that guy, or I'm feeling a little jealous right now. It's kind of weird. And you just speak it. It's very hard to do that. People usually don't do that. Imagine how much different things would be if you spoke like that. You were just honest. Instead, we get all quiet. Someone says, "Are you okay?" "Yeah, I'm fine." And it's just like passive aggressive, or worse, we'll say something like, "Oh, I see you checking her out," or da 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 da, or we get aggressive and we use language maybe even to manipulate, or we communicate something. We see the person looking at someone, so we look at someone, or we give them the cold shoulder and then maybe flirt with someone else ourselves, or play a little game. Again, all of this is very Mercury stuff, very Mercury kind of stuff. We communicate not just through language, but through all kinds of means. Again, so Mercury is first that story that's telling you something. It starts with that story. I see you looking at her, and then I'm feeling jealous. What's the story? What's the interpretation I'm getting? how do I respond to that? Like, is that message correct? Do I know that that my partner was flirting with someone else, or is that just me imagining something because I'm getting triggered? That's the first function of the Mercury. Is that true? And again, when Mercury's powerful, we learn from our mistakes because we've all made the mistake before. We've all gotten jealous and then been wrong and realized how stupid it was. And again, when Mercury's powerful, we learn from that and we don't keep repeating it. We learn from it and we don't trust that negative voice. So we can short circuit a lot of that negative behavior. When Mercury's weak, though, it's hard for us to learn from that. Or we'll spin out on the negative thing. It's very unconscious. It just kind of is hardwired for us to say something or be passive aggressive or play a little game or not communicate honestly. And people get sick of it after a while, you know? I don't care how great you are, you're not all that. After a while, people are going to get sick of you doing it if that's the way you communicate. Right? It doesn't matter. You're not all that. Right? And so when Mercury goes retrograde, it's really a good time for us to be honest about these things, right? And of course, there's always the computer glitches and the technology glitches. And again, when someone has a powerful Mercury, usually they have a pretty good handle on those things, but you want to notice how the details in your life are well arranged or not and try to get them handled while you can. But again, as it goes retrograde in Scorpio, Scorpio is the sign of that kind of, dark potential, sort of paranoia and whatnot. And it's going to be, so you can have a tendency to maybe spin out a little bit on that stuff. And it's going to be retrograde until early December. Oops, let me get this here. It's until I think it was December 7th. 6th, December 7th, it turns direct. And it's actually stationary direct. So till early December, maybe the first week or 10 days in December. So you want to be aware of that. Notice that voice in your head and how precise it is. It might be a little skewed because it's going retrograde in Scorpio. So that negative potential is there to spin out little passive aggressive, undercutting communications. You pay a price for that. Everybody does. That's not good communication. Instead, the creative option with something like that is to really introspect and be vulnerable and be willing to speak the vulnerable truth. Be willing to be honest. That's all Mercury's asking, is be honest. And it's hard to be honest with in emotional stuff. This is one of the reasons why Mercury is difficult in water signs. Again, imagine if you just said, wow, I'm feeling kind of jealous right now. And you just said it rather than played some little game. Well, no, we don't say it because, it's too hard to say that. It's embarrassing or whatever it is. But it's liberating to speak the truth, to speak the emotional truth rather than play a little game around it. So again, Mercury's where we play games. And there are games we're supposed to play. We're supposed to play games, but the right games, not play games with people's feelings or don't mask negative feelings in a game. So again, another creative option here within that kind of interpersonal expression is literally, Mercury is where we're good with language and skills, and it can, when Mercury's in Scorpio, it can make a person a good writer, good for focusing and concentrating on deep details. Many people I know who have Mercury in Scorpio are really good writers. I've noticed this because Scorpio is a feminine, reflective sign where we feel in our heart, and we're looking for alchemy and transformation and change. And Mercury is, again, bringing the details and giving a voice to that. So wherever Mercury goes, we're giving voice to that thing. So right now it's time to give voice to that Scorpio energy, which is that, that transformation. But as it's retrograde, we're kind of reflecting on it a little bit and maybe have to be careful not to spin out on the emotional darkness or detriment. So anyway, I hope this was helpful, and share it with others, and have a good Mercury retrograde.